It's funny, isn't it, how people go back to the language when they're felt suppressed in their own selves, then they sort of hark back to like a cultural root when it's actually the suppression that they need to deal with, isn't it? And it's sort of a way to try to. I see that in Indigenous cultures as well. Like, there's been so much harm done to Aboriginals in Australia, and terrible trauma and ongoing, really. And there's a big emphasis in them of like preserving our language. And sometimes I feel it's more about
preserving memory of the trauma.
Yeah, or just trying to hold on, trying to regain a love of self through like a cultural tradition, rather than dealing with the lack of love and the lack of respect that's been so ongoing. Yeah. And almost the culture and the language becomes a symbol of the sort of struggle out of that, but it's not actually dealing with what has happened.
Yeah. And then when I was over in Australia that time, was it Tasmania and things, islands that there was 3,000 people living on it, native, but when they actually went in and culled them all,
not a single person who is from that tribal region, like they were all exterminated. That happened like in a lot of regions in Australia where there was like hunting parties that go out just to Aboriginals. It's terrible. And a lot of, also in Australia we have what they call the stolen generation, where there was and it was trying to destroy culture, where the government would go in and take babies from their families and give them to white families. But also terrible things where they try and infect whole tribes with smallpox. They put smallpox on the blankets. A lot of very, but I mean, it happened in the US as well, like terrible. And it's a global issue. It's happening to people all over the world.
Yeah. I recognise that shirt, Tim. Could it fit someone?
Yeah. That's my favourite shirt you've worn so far.
It's so nice.
First time it's been out of the box. Yeah. We found this place in Australia that just makes these kind of shirts, colourful linen blends really nicely. So these are replacing my Desert Grail shirts. Desert Grail's gone all black and white, black and brown.
For the guys.
Yeah, for the guys. For the girls, they still have comfortable things. For the guys, they've gone all brown and black. I suppose they wanted a bigger market, but that's meant that all of the nice colours have all gone for men. So it took us a while to find. Mary found this one manufacturer in Australia with all cotton stuff.
Trying to wear more and more natural fibres.
Yeah. So I've got a little collection of these and long sleeve ones and short sleeve ones. It's good to find colourful stuff. It's hard to find colourful stuff for men. For women it's more easily done, but most men want to wear black or brown.
It's so safe and easy, isn't it, to wear black when it's not?
Yeah. It's all about it's all about being cool, really, isn't it? But it's not really.
You hide. I think you hide.
Yeah, you hide it. Yeah, so I like colouring. It's the artist in me.
Well,
Everyone's here? Okay.
Will I go back and get them? Is that still out there?
Yeah, we might just
this week?
Mary slept a bit, I think.
A bit.
I didn't. Yeah.
I crashed out. I crashed out
No,
a step
probably.
earlier.
I feel worse than yesterday. Is the answer to the question. You can feel it in my throat, right? It's just like, oh, yeah. Haven't rested enough. Yeah. Got attacked by spirits all night last night. Just a common theme on this trip as well. Everywhere we go, we pick up new groups of large groups of spirits, and usually most of them are pretty concerned about Mary and I, and particularly myself at this stage. And so a lot of it's about just trying to wear me down. And my spirit friends have backed off because they're trying to help me stand on my own 2 feet. So it's just a process I've got to go through, have some grief, and something crying a fair bit about it on the trip. Yeah, it's just, and it's been good actually. Everything I deal with, I've had a sort of like a body healing as a result in different areas of my body. So I actually am feeling better, believe it or not. And my back is a lot better than it's been for a long time. And my bowel is a lot better. Most of it's about this spirit attack that I've been under since childhood. That's why half part of my bowel was removed when I was 18 months old or so. Because it was under attack then as well. And it's been all my life, and quite oppressive all my life.
All right. Who would like to have some microphones? Olga, thank you.
Thank you, guys. How'd you go with your homework? You reckon read good?
I don't know as much about
That's good to know that.
Good to know, define what we're aiming for, isn't it?
All right. I'd like to probably start. Yeah. Good day. All right. So yesterday, what would you like to ask?
It's the question that you were just talking about there about spirits.
Yeah.
So can I ask, because what is spirit attack? I'm saying I don't know, and maybe I'm having it and I don't even know it, because I feel I say things like, oh, you're this or you're that. Is that? I'm thinking it's me talking to me.
Yeah, well, that's spirit influence.
Oh,
That's not attack.
okay. Well, that's, yeah.
So maybe we should define it, should we? Okay. There's a number of ways in which your relationship with spirits is affecting your lives, right? So we notice for those of you in Ireland, so it's generally like this, where you've got yourself, so me, and then we've got some spirits around us who are hooking into us because of different injuries we have. And in most of you Irish, you have a very, you try to bend over backwards to be conciliatory. Does that make sense? So there's obviously fear of confrontation and fear of disagreement, and potential anger that will come from the disagreement, right? So there's a tendency to be conciliatory. How do I spell conciliatory? Sorry. Whatever. So
I think we get
you know what I mean, right? So in other words, there's a tendency to pander to people. Like, there's a tendency to sort of bend over backwards to help them out even when they're being demanding. So even when they're being unloving, there's a tendency to just give them what they want and then they'll go away, is sort of the general feeling. So it's like, so this has a tendency to attract spirits who are demanding, who have demands, who are quite sort of angry. And in the extreme case, they might even get abusive with you. Like they might even just, every time you don't do what they want, you have this sort of, what you guys often think is an internal voice condemning yourself.
Yes.
But actually it's a spirit condemning you. And a lot of ways they get away with it is by you thinking you've sort of got this sort of internal voice that's going yabba, 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 to you about what you feel are your problems.
Yes.
But oftentimes it's the spirits who are just using your own injuries against you so that they can get what they want out of you. Does that make sense? So you could really say under those circumstances, the spirit is like an abuser, really, don't they? So they're abusive. I'm just going to have to have a cough. That's better. So it's really abusive. But depending on how conciliatory you are as an individual, depends on the level of abuse, the level of demand, and so forth. So for many of you, you sort of experience it like an internal voice that you often think is your own thoughts, but actually it's the spirit's thoughts. They're just telling you things about you that to try to keep you in a certain state of submission. So the problem with these emotions is they make you quite submissive. And this is why generally, I notice, Irish are more law-abiding than many people in Europe. The speed limit's 100 in Ireland, everyone goes 99. Speed limit's 100 in like Austria, everyone does 150. So it's sort of like, because of this sort of submission to law, and sometimes it comes from oppression from law as well, but there is this general relaxed feeling in Ireland too. We don't have to rebel with everybody. It's sort of this relaxed sort of submissive feeling. In that way, you're very much aligned to other countries like Canada and probably Australia. And this is often why Irish people like going to Canada and Australia, and why Australians like going to Ireland and Canada and things like that, right? Because there's a very similar feel of relaxed environment, relaxed people, submissive, don't want to make too much of a trouble with anyone. If someone gets abusive, they sort of put up with it a bit, and then they just go, I just don't want to spend a lot of time with them, so you just sort of withdraw. But you don't have it out with them and say, look, the reason why I'm withdrawing is because you're abusive.
Do Irish people also use a lot of humour to diffuse?
Humour,
Australians.
Australians are the same, using humour to dismiss.
Nobody get too excited, let's just laugh about it. Or,
have jokes about that. They joke away even the character of people who are abusive, and this is a very common thing in Australia too. Okay, but really what you're doing by having these emotional injuries, and these are, remember as we raised yesterday about love, these are actually injuries in love. They're not actually loving injuries in love. So by doing this, you're attracting spirits who can do the opposite, so they have a level of power over your life. They'll talk to you. It was interesting at Marie's, where's Marie there? And there you go. Right next to it. Mary and I, when we arrived in your home, there was about 20 spirits living in your home. And one of the things we did the first night was, even though it was late, was we tried to get them to move on, because it was like they were living in your home and they've been living with you this entire time. And obviously you were hardly living the home yet yourself, but they've been, 3 of them have been with you in your previous home, and they come to your new home. And then the other 17 or so were living in the home attached to the previous tenants of the home. And some of them have gone back 150 years, so they've been living there, like living in the location in the region, and then just when the homes got built, they just moved into the homes. And we talked to them about why they were there, and they said, Marie just lets us be here. She doesn't really care we're here, so You know? So, and obviously there's things happening in the home and things like that you know, that are attracting, but because you also, like you have this underlying emotional state, there's this feeling of, I'll put up with it and I'll allow it, you know, and things like that. And so you see this happening in a lot, but probably your home, Marie, was interesting because it's the first home we've actually been to on the trip where we stayed in somebody else's home where there was such a large group. Normally in a home there might be one or two, you know what I mean?
More often they're attached to the people who live in the home rather than the home.
Are you mute?
Oh, sorry, I'm muted.
Yeah. So,
Usually they're attached. Sorry, stand up. Usually they're attached to the people, or they're attracted to the people in a home. But what was interesting about your home is that they like the home. You know, they just they feel it's an easy environment for them just to keep inhabiting.
Yeah. And they haven't moved far away from your home their whole lives after passing. Yeah, you want to ask?
Yeah, I just want to ask, are they loving spirits or angry
no,
or aggressive or?
No. Well, when you say aggressive, I would say aggressive. You know, they were perving on Mary in the shower and things like that.
A bit creepy.
Bit creepy. Yeah.
But they were more involved in personal addictions that they'd had on Earth. So they had some injuries in love about sexuality, and they had injuries about, some of them had used alcohol and things in their life, and so they sort of have this sort of feeling it's okay to engage in things to get away from myself.
Not really dark.
Not
like
vicious.
As dark as some others.
Yeah.
And there are some we met that are extremely dark, but and there's some here with us today that are extremely dark, by the way. But these ones are not as dark as you might imagine. They're just earthbound, and they've been earthbound for a long time. And so we talked to them, and I said to them, look, you've either got a choice of having a discussion with us about why you're here, and things like that, at some point, or you're going to have to, for 8 days, be restricted. I'm going to ask for you to be restricted from looking at Mary in particular, but also other things. So, but they also had some level of self-awareness in the sense that they admitted that that's what they were doing. They admitted they were, that it wasn't kind what they were doing, and they felt quite bad about it once it was pointed out to them. And so the very next day they'd all gone. Yeah. In the morning we didn't even finish up having the following conversation. They were all gone. Now they might come back when you go home, but they haven't been there since we've been there the next day. So, and partly it's because we introduced them to a group of spirits who could help them, and also we talked to them about the fact they can have a better life, a less restricted life, rather than just living in one home on Earth. They could be having their homes in the spirit world and have a proper life, that they haven't had for some of them, like I said, 150, 100 years. Remember, you got your castle next door, the old castle. There's a whole bigger history with that where it never really got built and never really got used, but there was a whole heap of workers involved in the castle, and some of them were workers from the castle and things like that. And so they all thought they were just going to stay earthbound for the rest of their lives, basically. And they didn't really understand there was a spirit world. So it was a bit sad, really, and they felt their sadness. They felt some sadness, and as a result, they were introduced to their new homes. Okay? So, but this emotion, these groups of emotions, attract that. Does that make sense? Spirits, and they weren't very demanding or angry. They were just, they could get away with it, so they did. Does that make sense to you? A lot of people in your life, and the more conciliatory you become and the more submissive you become, a lot of people go, well, I can get away with it with you, so you let me get away with it, so I'm going to get away with it. So that's like sometimes your children, right? You set some boundaries, but you don't enforce them, and so your children know they're going to get away with it. And your husband sets some boundaries, don't enforce them, he knows he's going to get away with it, so he doesn't, and he hasn't loving enough to actually make the decision himself to go, That's not good. Right? So it's the same with these spirits. They're just not loving enough to work out for themselves that actually what they're doing is not very pleasant. And particularly the fact that they haven't negotiated with you about living in your home. You know, they haven't come along and said, Marie, we're living in your home, is that okay? And partially they feel like, well, it's going to be okay, because we can feel from you, from the emotions, that it's going to be okay. So we're going to do it. Make sense? So there's that kind of spirit. So you're right, that they are abusive, but they're not like what the average person on earth calls abusive.
Could you call them exploitative or?
Well, yeah, but even that, the average person doesn't see it as exploitation, do they? They're exploiting your emotional condition to their own advantage. So they go, well, what else can we do? We don't know where else to go and what else to do. And, you know, like nobody tells us. So we just stick around here. And what would happen with the law normally is after them living there a few hundred years perhaps, they'd just get tired of it and then wonder what else. And then when they start wondering what else, then normally someone can come along and say, look, this is what else. But they have to first have a desire to wonder what else. And in the conversation we had with them, I just sped up that process, you could say, by talking to them about there is other things you could be doing. There's other things you could be enjoying. Many of you being locked up, like they're sort of like, they don't see it as being locked up or in prison, but like I said to them, most of you stayed in this house the whole time the house has been built. And you haven't moved away from it the entire time. You haven't even gone walking down the street or somewhere else. They've just stayed in the house. And so, and of course in the prior, I think 2 tenants ago or 1 tenant ago, there was drugs in the home as well. So that encouraged some of the darker ones to come and be involved with the drugs with the people. And there was a fair bit of alcohol at one point. And so that encouraged some alcoholics from the spirit world to be there as well. But they just all stayed there because they just felt like they had nowhere else to go, sort of thing. So you can say those sort of, you can say these kind of spirits, even though they're demanding and angry, really, you could really say they're not expressing their anger much or their demand much, right? What they're really just doing is they're just going, we're relaxed dudes. You know, this is where we have lived and we don't really know anything else. You could really say in a lot of ways they're quite just ignorant of what's happening, what they're doing and what's actually happening, right? But they are taking advantage, even though they don't realise it sometimes. They are taking advantage of your good. What people call your good nature, yeah. But actually, from God's perspective, this is not a good nature. We'll talk about, see, many of you feel this is what makes you humble, isn't it? You know, later we're going to raise the issue, aren't we, of what is humility. And for many of you, this is what is humility, being conciliatory and pandering and being submissive and, you know, having a good sense of humour when somebody is, you know, a bit on the edge in terms of their, you know, attempts to control you or whatever. Right? So you could say these kind of spirits are mostly ignorant of the fact that they could be in a better place. They don't have a lot of information about the spirit world because they've not been there. Some of them who were in Mary's house had been to the spirit world and they didn't like where they were going, so they wanted to live on earth instead. And so that's why they were living there too. So it's just like, oh, we don't like where we were told we should go, so we come back to earth. And for the most part, they live in quite a fair bit of internal cohesion too. Like there's 20 people in the house, and it's not a big house, it's just a fairly small house. And there's 20 people living there, so they do trip over each other sometimes, just like you would, right? And they do argue with each other sometimes, but generally they get along. And there's a what's that movie, that series?
The British series?
There's a
Ghost.
play.
Yes.
Yeah.
I said to you, I feel like I'm in an episode.
Yeah. And they were like, you know, you think about most of those spirits in that series, Ghost, even though it's comedy. And many of them thought they were doing a good thing, even though they're not doing very good things. And a lot of times they were just afraid of moving on and things like that.
Hung up on their earth life.
Hung up on their earth life, yeah. Which is what these spirits are. And of course, when a person is quite conciliatory and submissive, then they're not, in this case, they weren't living through Marie, so they weren't actually attached to Marie. They were attached to her house. Right? Most spirits would attach themselves to a person, but they felt that they could live in the house because of Marie's submissive, conciliatory, and sort of generally relaxed nature. Right? That she wouldn't worry, it wouldn't bother her that she's living with 20 other people. Does it bother you now that you know that? Well, they might come back when you're there. Yeah, you want to ask Talia? She just passed the mic across to Talia there.
I just want to ask this. I have this.
I don't want to have another personal because I haven't answered.
No, it's not personal. It's about this idea that if there's spirits there, it's not like if there would be 20 people living in the house, it would be very freaky. But if there's 20 spirits living there, there's something that, I mean, maybe it feels different, and I don't exactly understand why. Maybe
it doesn't pass.
Yeah, because you see them, I guess.
But I feel, for the most people, you sort of blank them out, emotionally and also sight-wise. Most people just blank it all out, and therefore it's not freaky anymore. It's like, it's similar to the thing you said yesterday about God. Why can't I see God? Well, and by not seeing God, you don't feel as connected to God. But see, when you feel more emotionally connected, you'll find, there's those spirits in here. I don't know if I want to live with them in the next 8 days. So we pass them like that. Okay, so then there's a group of spirits, you could say, who are a bit sort of. And by the way, we could go on for days here as to different types of spirits. So what I'm trying to do is just give you examples of the kinds of spirits that might be attracted, right? There's different spirits that are family, and generally they are connected directly to the person, right? And sometimes these are connected directly to the person too, right? But this kind of spirits is directed to the person because they think they care about you. And usually what they are is family members or people in the spirit world who feel like, I really like that person. I really like, Marie's or Margaret's, or I really like their personality and their nature. And I really like, they feel like family to me. Right? And so they go, okay, they need a bit of help in their life because I see that they're not doing things just right. Not that these spirits know what's right, but they just sort of go, I can see things that you can't see going on. So, when an example is, let's say you are married to somebody and he goes, he said he's at work when he's at the pub or something like that, and the spirits go, that's not very nice, because he can see him or she can see him at the pub, right? And you might not know. She's going, we need to have a bit of an argument with him about that. Who are they going to argue through? The person, because they can't actually have an argument with the person. Like they can, project out an emotion, but if he's very insensitive, which most men have a tendency to do, project emotion, and it doesn't really work. So now, if they got some connection with you, they can go project some emotions through you, and then you feel like, I'm a bit angry with my hubby. And I don't really understand why, but I feel like I need to have an argument. So you do. And eventually it might come out that it was at the pub rather than at work or whatever. So these kind of spirits feel they're sort of protecting your interests. They're giving you information that you would not otherwise have, and so forth, right? So this is all, we're still talking about spirit influence here. Right? Not overcloaking, not when somebody becomes completely overcloaked, but just influence, where family members from the past are going, we're looking after you, we care about you, you're my grandchild, so I'm going to care about you, and I'm going to tell you when things are off in the house. And it's also oftentimes their perception of when it's off, right? So if they've got an injury with men that says, never do anything for the man, whenever you do anything for the man, they'll say, what are you doing? Stop. You know, they'll put some heavy on you to stop. And if you're connected to them, and most people are because the family often have relative injuries, then you just go, that's what I do, you know, like, I'll stop, you know. But you don't even think, you think it's your fault to stop.
Yes, I've noticed huge resistance. You know, I feel, I don't want to be doing this. Yeah, I just don't want to.
Yeah.
And then I said, what?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Why? Yeah. Now, of course, for them to also have this kind of influence, there has to be a fair bit of this going on, doesn't it? Inside of you as well. There has to be a fair bit of, I'll listen to somebody who's bossing me around a bit. Right? When the reality is, if you really are in alignment with your own free will, when somebody starts bossing you around, you become more resistant. If you were in alignment with your free will, you would say, no, that's wrong, I'm not going to do it, right? And when somebody's bossy, right? But the majority of people don't do that. They become more conciliatory with somebody who's bossy. Oh, you see this at the shop a lot, right? The bossy person who's customer gets served first, that kind of thing. And that's the kind of feeling that often is engaged here. Right? So here we're talking about relatively, these still are unloving people, but they're relatively uninformed and to a degree ignorant about how they're even being unloving. They don't really know they're being unloving. They think it's just normal and good for you and so forth, right? They don't really know. And then, like last week, we talked to a group of spirits that were with one young man in the audience. And they were a bit different because he had a lot of feelings, which we'll talk about in a minute. And so he had so this was a young fellow. Should we call him a young fellow? I'm a man. But I've got competition feelings with my dad to a fairly mild degree. And I also want to feel like I'm a good guy. And nobody really noticed me much in my childhood either. Like nobody really, mum and dad, you know, there's a lot of parenting that goes on that's really like the child is really barely noticed when they're being brought up, you know what I mean? And that causes a person to have this sort of injury of like, somebody noticed me. Can I be better so somebody will notice me, you know? Have a feeling of, I need to have some level of like approval from people. And so this is the kind of person who would set up an influencing thing on YouTube or, you know, that kind of thing, you know, just become an influencer. So I'm influencing people and then people look up to me and then, now I can feel that people look up to me because my parents never did, that kind of thing. Now this kind of issue does attract darker spirits because there's a whole group of spirits in the spirit world who feel they've missed out on a life on earth. So that common thing is, you know, some of them died from a car accident and they were in their 20s or teens. And while they were on earth, they were quite reckless, and that's why they died. But they now feel like their life on earth was terminated. And because they weren't in a good condition when they passed, there's no spirit life that's any good for them either. So now they want to relive their life through somebody. Right? And so what they do, so, you know, if you died in your early teens or 20s, you've missed out on a lot of sex with women, and you've missed out on a bit of feeling of power, and you've also missed out on, you know, doing reckless things like, you know, driving a car recklessly or some reckless sport that's potentially life-threatening, but makes you feel like connected to yourself and things like that. And the spirits have sort of missed out on all of that. So now what they would like to do is come to earth and use this man and his experiences through which they can feel from their spirit body to his physical body. They can feel his senses and a lot of other things and influence this man in harmony with the man's desires. Right? Because obviously the man has those injuries, so he's going to have those desires. So in harmony with those desires, they're going to influence the man to do the things they couldn't do. So for this young man, they were teeing up his sexual encounters for him. You know, finding out a woman that was really and he's a fairly good-looking young man, so that is pretty easy. That's why they connected to him, because they thought, if I choose a bad-looking young man, then there's less chance of it happening, is what they think. So they choose a good-looking young man. It's better. And so these spirits, even though they're darker than the other groups of spirits we just mentioned, but they're not like evil motivation. Does that make sense? For power and domination and all those things. These kind of spirits are more just interested in controlling this man to have some experiences themselves, and frequently 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these spirits will connect to the man and they'll share the experiences. So they'll, your turn now. And when he has sex with one lady, it's one of the spirits' turn who likes that lady, and then another spirit likes a more plump lady, let's say. So when he has sex with that lady, the other spirit comes and has sex through him with that lady and things like that. So you can see what's going to happen to the man, though, is he's going to get darker and darker. And he's not really engaging his own will. He's being influenced heavily from the will of the spirits. And so it's a very insidious problem, because the man thinks, my life's looking good. You know, I'm getting the things that I think are really good to get, not knowing that he's actually got a group of spirits with him that are influencing him to get those things, and that actually his life isn't his own, really. So now it's getting closer to what we would call overcloaking or possession. Not complete possession, but overcloaking in the sense of when he's doing what they want him to do, one of them is doing it for him. Right? So when he's off climbing, dangerous mountains with no ropes, one of the spirits who loves that is doing it with him. Being careful here, careful there, careful here, careful there. And if the man actually falls and dies, which is the last thing the spirit wants him to do, because otherwise he can't climb the next mountain, he has to go and find another young man to climb the next mountain. So the last thing the spirit wants is that he dies. They want him to be skilled at it. And so they're getting to investigate the skills and to get all the things together and the proper equipment and everything to make sure that he's safe. But they're not really caring about his safety, are they? They're really caring about the spirit's just caring about his experience. So you could say these spirits are much more selfishly motivated. Make sense? Okay.
And they're not so innocent in there.
They're not so innocent. Yeah. When the discussion we had with Errol, which is the spirit involved in this last week, he wanted to tell me he was innocent, but the more I pointed out that he wasn't that innocent, the more he first became quite abusive of me. Showing me I'm picking on the man, and why am I picking on the man, and why do I feel like, why am I trying to harm these men, because all he's trying to do is help them, and what, if Errol thought that if he couldn't influence River to do things, then River might not do them, and then River would miss out on his experiences. And so, that's what he felt. The spirit felt that. And he felt that I was being a baddie. And he started getting a bit abusive with me. It was a bit touch and go, actually, whether I could actually have a conversation with him. But sometimes as a spirit, it's hard once you start the conversation with the person but you really want to get out of the conversation. If the person wants to stay in the conversation, it's pretty hard to get out of the conversation because the person's interest in you causes you to come back to want to go into the conversation again. So it's sort of it gets a bit confusing for the spirit. And eventually he had a breakthrough about what his feelings about God were. And once he had that breakthrough, he had lots of things come to him through the reception of love that he received from God. He had a lot of things come to him about how wrong what he was doing actually was. And it was very interesting. Once he had that, River started crying as well in the audience. And so River could now start to connect to himself in terms of the sadness he felt about his dad and competitive with man and other things like that he wasn't feeling before. And it was interesting because the day after, River looked brighter, like it looked more like a person who was in command of himself. Yeah? Someone who was connected to himself. Before then, a lot of spirit influence was happening. And what was happening before then is whenever we were talking about a subject that the spirits didn't like me talking about, River would just zone out. But now there was a disconnect. River could tune into the subject after that. Make sense? Yeah. So you can see that the influence is still bad, but the spirit is thinking still he's doing good, but it's really a self-delusion because he knows in his heart that it's not so good, and he can also see himself and his own condition darkening as he's doing it. So, which I reminded him of, and he didn't want me to remind him of that. So this was all happening, and he eventually had that breakthrough where he talked about his feelings about God, that God doesn't care for him, God doesn't, he's never known anybody in his life to care about him. And the deep sadness he had about that, he had a big cry about that. And then now we can help him properly. Yeah. Okay, so far you can see there's you can see on the spirit side, there's increasing levels of evil because of the increasing levels of evil in the injury on the earth side, which causes the attraction. You follow? Yep. All right, and the extreme of that is a man or woman, so someone, right, who actually has desires for power, control of others, to feel they're superior to everyone else on earth. So superiority. They want the adulation of people on earth, the almost worship of people on earth. So they're looking for being worshipped or honoured or adored. They demand honour, and so forth. They are very dark emotions. Very dark emotions. If you have those emotions in your past, you will definitely be in some of the deepest parts of God. Right? And what that does is it attracts a group of spirits that are already in the deepest parts of God. Who due to their own life experience often, they've had either one of two things. One is no power at all. No control over life at all. They were treated like they were inferior their entire life. They were treated like with disdain their entire life. So you either have that kind of a spirit who doesn't want to feel those emotions, or the type of spirit who had all this in his earth life and is now doesn't have it in his spirit life. Right? So one of those two. And because of these deep desires for these feelings, these spirits will do many, many evil things. And this group of spirits, if you align yourself with them by having these emotions, it's going to cause you to do a whole heap of things that you think are good, that are actually taking you straight to hell, right, when you pass. And this group of spirits, they also become very manipulative, devious, and abusive, particularly to anyone else who confronts them in any way, right? And so they have extreme forms of, really, they are happy to revert to violence. And from a spirit perspective, what they do to perpetrate that violence is they try to perpetrate it against the spirit body of the person they're trying to perpetrate violence towards. So what that means is they try to take over the person's mind, or they try to cause them to have nervous reactions in their physical body. It depends on the openness emotionally in the person, not this person, but other people. And they manipulate situations by doing these things to people, where a person becomes very frightened of them. So this person who wants power control to feel superior really needs other people to be in fear, right, in order for this to work. In order for this person to gain power over others, the people he's gained power over, or she's gained power over, need to be afraid of him. The people he's gaining power over needs to think that they are inferior so that they can believe he is superior. They need to feel they need to be controlled so that the spirits in this, the person in this zone can control them. They need to feel they need to have someone to look up to, someone to worship, someone to honour, someone to respect, and someone they can listen to, and they tell them a whole heap of things and they'll just go and do them like robots almost. They need these people for this to occur. Many politicians are in this state because that's how they gain power, by having people in fear honour them and respect them and their decisions and so forth. Right? So they need fear. Now these spirits know this person needs fear in order for these things to be actually occurring. So what they do is they perpetrate violence, spiritual violence, but also physical violence where possible, by influencing others towards the person in fear. You follow? And this causes the person in fear to become submissive, to try to avoid their fears, which causes them to feel more engaged to the person who wants power. Right?
And we could say this person in fear, as long as they're compliant to all this, sometimes they don't even realise that this is happening, hey?
Well, a lot of people have been in fear from their childhoods, right? Haven't they? They've had all sorts of things happen in their childhood, and they're very afraid people generally. And also they've had all sorts of inferior feelings coming from their childhood. And a lot of people also, their mother or father want the child to worship almost the mum or dad. So it's a very common injury to feel like you need someone to honour and respect in your life, a mentor to look up to, type of thing. Very common injury. And if this person who it becomes a mentor wants power, wants control, what feels themselves to be superior, then you're now in a very dangerous situation, right? This is what people accuse me of, right? Isn't it? Like this week they accused you as an audience in the paper of being stupid lambs who are just listening to a power-mad man, right? And they made that accusation in your, what was it? Irish Independent. Yeah. So the issue is most of them think because I'm saying I'm Jesus that I want these things. I have no interest in any of these things. But there's many people we meet that do. And so this person must have these things in order to survive, they feel. These people feel they need a person like that in order for them to be guided and looked after. A lot of it's about safety as well. They feel if by aligning themselves with this person, it's like in a prison, when there's a person who is the boss of a gang in prison, then the people who don't belong to the gang feel very exposed and very unsafe until they become a part of the gang.
right? And then they feel more safe and less exposed. This is the same dynamic. Right? So these will revert to violence, threats, blackmail, ridicule. What else? Heaps of other things, right? Yep.
It's sort of like an undermining of your,
Manipulation.
your own thoughts and feelings.
Manipulate.
They project at you that you're hurting if you...
Oh yes, that you're morally bad if you don't do what they say. So what should we call that?
Shaming.
Shaming, yeah, shame.
Gaslighting.
What's gaslighting?
That's when somebody undermines, tells you you don't feel what you actually feel. Make sense? Now, of course, most people on earth, when they do that, they don't know what you feel. So they're really undermining your feelings. Now, of course, every celestial spirit can tell you what you feel, right? But they wouldn't do so unless you asked, generally, or if you were in their company, right? So, yeah. Okay, what else? Now, these kind of spirits often, let's say this person wants to go to another country, let's say. These spirits will usually go and visit that country first, find all the people who they can bully and control, and then set up meetings for this person so that the person's desires are fed and the spirit's desires are fed. Now, obviously, each time this happens, this person's getting darker, 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 darker. And these spirits are getting darker, 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 right, into the hells, to the point where this person may become someone like Hitler or Stalin, who were prepared to murder millions of people in order to have power, right? And these spirits are the spirits who control the world's political systems. They control the world's media systems. They control the world's drug companies to a large degree. They control, there's a large number of, you could say, enterprises, things on earth that are controlled by these spirits. Yeah. And then there's people who are aspiring to be those spirits, right? And they will get these people to do something that might seemingly be good on the outside, but eventually you can see the darkness of it as time progresses. Okay. So that's a pretty dark situation, isn't it? Yeah. Now, can you feel how scared many of you are about that?
I'm feeling it down, and I'm almost hearing, see how bad you are, see, this is...
Yeah. So that's the start of it, that these people are wanting superiority, wanting control, wanting power, want to be worshipped, want to be honoured. And so that's sort of, you can see again that the emotional injury of the individual is leading to the attraction. And of course, these spirits are looking for people who are prone to that. Because as a spirit, you know the colour of the injury. There's a colour emitted out of via the spirit body of the injury. So when a person wants power, there's a very strong dark brown red colour that comes out of the person, and the spirits just can identify it straight away. That person wants power, I'm with it. Like, it's done instantly. Yeah. And they can identify it, and they know that injury they can play on. And what they do first is get a beachhead with the person. So they establish a connection with the person, and then they work on the person to darken their condition.
Can I just clarify though, Margaret? Do you think you're one of these people?
No, that's why I'm trying to understand. I don't today.
You don't have any of these, do you?
You're not this.
No, you're not one of these people.
No.
You don't have any of it, right?
But when you're asking about spirit attack, really what you're starting to explain is how spirit attack happens, aren't you?
Yeah. Now, if this person no longer desires to be under the control of these spirits have invested so much time in the person. And finding a person, like there's already groups of spirits with other people who have got these same problems, finding another person, you have to go probably right to childhood to find another person and develop them as a child to be this person. If you're a spirit that's ripped away from this relationship, then you'd have to go somewhere else. So what these spirits then do is if this person wanted to change and wanted to grow, these spirits will let them do it as long as there's no way that the person would, through the changes, would actually ever be released. So they'll let you talk to spirits. They'll let you think you're loving. They'll let you think you're truthful. They'll let you think you want love, think you want truth. They'll let you think all of these things, right? But these spirits, as long as you just think it and you don't feel it, they're fine. They know that. But as long as you're in a facade about it, they're fine too. I know one man. He came to a few seminars like 15, 20 years ago, probably 15 years ago or so. But he's like this, he wants power, and the spirit, he tried to get away from it a couple of times, he couldn't. But now what he's doing is like he tees up groups of women mostly, and fundamentally does all these sexual things with them, and he's classified as a sexual guru, and women go to him for sexual healing, right? And it's all very, very dark, like very dark from God's perspective. Yeah. So this is the kind of these are the kind of emotions inside of a person that become very dangerous in a way, don't they, to your own spiritual development. Yeah.
Jay, could you explain how you get attacked though? Because this is not how you're getting attacked.
No.
Because that was the question.
No. Okay. But if this person tried to do the right thing, can you see? These spirits are going to go, I don't want that. We want to get you back. So as long as you're in the illusion of doing the right thing, they're fine. But as soon as you try to actually do the right thing, then these spirits will attack. Right?
So can I just ask how it came about is, I am a carer for my brother who's got an intellectual disability.
Yep.
And I find myself, as you were saying there, being resistant. I feel I'm always looking after you doing. I think you're able to do it yourself. I'm resistant all the time, and I'm blaming myself. Why am I so?
Because you can feel that there are spirits working through him that are playing on the fact of his incapacity, and they're playing on the fact, and they use that to justify bad behaviour.
Yeah.
And the trouble with an intellectual disability is that many parents do this to the child when they're very, very young. When they recognise the child has an intellectual disability, instead of trying to help them morally, they forget about trying to help them morally at all, because they say, the general thought is they can't know they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So they don't help them morally. And as a result of not helping them morally to develop, the spirits go, you pity, we've got a person who is now like immoral, not by his own desire, but because the parents have allowed him to become such. And now we've got a free rein to do what we want through this person. Everyone around would just blame it on his disability.
I often felt that it was testing me almost.
That's right, and that's what they do. They do this.
Yeah.
They also do it with children, obviously, where, permissive parents, for example, who basically let their children do anything they want. Well, that encourages very dark spirits to come to their children, and then to actually start doing things like being bossy in the family to the point of aggressive, being, domineering in the family. And you get these little taggers that are like only 3 or 4 years old, because of mum and dad's permissiveness, have now become totally almost spirit overcloaked in almost everything they do. We meet many families where the young tacker, the little child, is not themselves at all. They're not even there most of the time. Because these spirits, these teenage spirits oftentimes, spirits in their usually teenagers and 20s, are doing all sorts of things. Some of them are doing it just to torment mum. You know what I mean? Some of them are doing it just to torment dad. Some of them are doing it just because they can. Some of them are doing it because they get this thrill of, I can do anything I want, and mum and dad will just let me do it. I can run riot through it. Like, I can disturb everything. I can control everything in a room. And like, similar to the Kids Friday, right? And the parents will let it happen, and they'll completely overflow a lot of their small life, right? The problem with it for a child, of course, is that it's a lot to do with the parents' feelings, firstly. Secondly, so it's not the child's fault, it's the parents' fault that this is happening. Secondly, the child is not developing its own nature, its own desires, its own will. So when these spirits are taken away from the child is like a baby again who doesn't know how to use his will. Yep.
The person I'm looking after is an adult, and I heard you want something to do, so I even got the electrical stimulation.
Yep.
And it did make a difference.
But only for a short time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It came back again.
Yeah,
yes.
You can't do it through that.
Yeah, and I said to him, I'm sorry, but I said, this is the only thing. Because he
Yeah, and it also is not very loving.
Yeah.
To a spirit, electrical stimulation is like fire.
It was very nice, it was the foot. But yeah.
Oh yeah, it's like fire to the spirit. Yeah. So that's not very loving. And the loving way is to restrict the child.
Well, he's not a person I'm looking after, he's not a child.
I know. He is a child though, isn't he? Intellectually. He's disabled, he's a child.
Yes.
So you have to restrict him. So unfortunately, if you let this go on until they're an adult, which is what's happening in this case, if this was occurring as a child, if they were developing 2, 3, 4 years of age, by the time they got to 4 years of age, if they followed my suggestion, the child would be free of the spirit, and then you would actually see the real child. Even with its intellectual disability, it won't attract the spirit so much, right? But and this applies, they're a child. They're even in an adult form, they're intellectually still undeveloped and emotionally completely undeveloped because there have been spirits with them all their life. You have to restrict them. Now, when they become an adult, that's pretty tough. You need 4 or 5 people to restrict them. Yeah, and the average psychologist or doctor on earth would say, "Oh, you're hurting the child, and you're hurting them now, and it's terrible." But there's got to be some way, doesn't it? And this is a physical way of restricting him is quite effective. So I don't mean punishing them, I mean just restricting them, stopping them from moving until the spirit leaves. But you have to be very sensitive to what the spirit was. When they were leaving, you would talk to the spirit at the same time. You know what I mean? You would do a whole heap of things along with the restriction in order to release the child, or the adult child, from the burden that they're under. Because it is a burden, yeah. But because the child is so submissive and easily controlled because it doesn't have a developing intellect and a developing will, then of course these spirits can easily control it. Makes sense?
Yep. And they're now making physically ill, and you said that.
Yeah, well, the attachments will make them ill. Yeah, they'll die from the attachments probably. Usually that happens. That's why it's well known that most people with disabilities do die much younger than most people without, even though their physical body is still having the same functioning. The other trouble I notice with a lot of intellectual disabilities is parents give them any food, anything to keep them quiet, and the spirits learn, oh yeah, I can drink condensed milk all day every day, like, or something like that. You know, just the spirit likes it, and they go quiet. And so what the spirit does is go, I'm going to be noisy unless I get what I want, right? You give him what he wants and he's going to be quiet. So the average parent from this learns, oh, all I've got to do is give him what he wants and he'll go quiet. So they do. They give him what they want. They give him, like I knew one family, condensed milk, like actual condensed milk. Very sweet, right? Rotting the teeth out and everything. But it made them quiet. Right? So the child, of course, is very unhealthy, fat and unhealthy, because of just this very bad diet, no vegetables, no fruit, no nuts, no, just processed food and condensed milk, right? And you think about that, you think, wow, how long is that child going to survive physically eating that kind of a diet? That's like a McDonald's diet, you know? It has no nutritional benefits, so therefore the child's probably going to die very young because of it, right? So yeah, there's all sorts of things that people on earth do, thinking they are doing the right thing, but not understanding the dynamics of what's going on.
So if he wants to go on a binge of chocolate, suppose, I'm trying to turn between his free will, and this is where
So it's not his free will.
So now I can.
It's the spirit's free will that you're giving to the spirit. He's just an unwitting pawn. And
unfortunately, because of what happens in terms of the brain's receptors with regard to getting what you want, there's going to be a very strong feeling in the person on earth, you know, who's intellectually disabled. There's going to be a very strong feeling on the person on earth that they want that thing too. So it's sort of like, it's a double whammy. The spirit wants it, and the person on earth now also wants it, and it's going to be a heavy addiction, a physical one. But the person doesn't have a lot of emotional addictions, you see, because of the disabilities. So you can quite easily clear these problems, but you have to be on it at a young age.
That hasn't happened. It's only now I'm seeing.
Well, now it's going to require more firmness, isn't it?
See, it was my parents. They both passed, so I am now the parent.
Yeah. And that's very difficult because you're dealing with somebody else's
totally.
problems, really. And what you probably need is some help to every time the person goes to get something that is an addiction on their butt, like a chocolate binge, you're going to have to restrict them. Now, how do you restrict an adult body person who has a child feeling? Because that adult body person is going to have a tantrum just like the child does, but it's going to be in an adult body. It's going to hurt the hell out of you, right, if you do that. So you're going to need help, and you're going to need some plan to work your way through it with the person. And you're also going to need to do the other things, and that is talk to the spirits around the person, ask your spirit friends to protect the child from those spirits. But unfortunately, because that hasn't happened from his childhood, it is going to be a lot longer to do because of his own demands and his own desires.
The medical profession years ago was on heavy medication.
Yeah, which is a form of restriction, isn't it? And I find this quite funny in a way that people are adverse to physical restriction, but are not adverse at all to totally blowing the mind up with chemicals in order to restrict somebody. So that's like...
I literally call it, when I was
chemical
working in mental
lobotomy.
health, chemical restriction.
Yeah, it's really a chemical lobotomy, isn't it? Like,
I see that as numbed down completely with medication.
now that's not going to help him either, is it? It's not loving. But you can see why people do it, because they don't understand the dynamics of what's going on. And as a result, they end up doing these things that they feel are more humane. But actually, what's the most humane is to restrict the child, when it's a child in particular, but even as an adult, is to restrict it till the point that you break the spirit bond. Spirits who have gotten their way for years and years and years and years are pretty easy to break away from somebody, because they've gotten their way for years and years and years and years, and if you stop them from getting away with it for 3 months, they'll just clear out and find someone else. That makes sense? That's what they'll do. Now, of course, if you're also talking to those spirits, and you're also, there's a lot of things you can do spiritually as well, isn't there? To help the situation, praying for help for, to control circumstances as well. But you're also going to have to be very careful of your own safety. Because spirits become murderers when they don't get what they want. So it's just as likely, if they become murderers, they pick up a knife and stab you to death with it.
The child won't be responsible for that action, but the spirit will, right? So you're going to have to make sure you have a plan that's safe for you in the process, right? Safety is going to be a key thing. Yeah?
He does seem a gentle person in.
Yeah. Every single child who's had this experience is a gentle person because they are undeveloped themselves. And they're just totally overcome by spirit. The spirit's not gentle.
Yeah, no,
So I wouldn't, even if the child did stab you, it wouldn't be the child's fault. The intellectually disabled person's fault. It would be the spirits with them. God attributes all the blame to them. Yeah. Make sense?
yes.
Yeah. But we haven't answered your question yet. Which is why my own spirit attacked, wasn't it?
Well, it was what is spirit
What is
attack?
spirit attack?
And you can see that, well, maybe you want to, but I can see how the spirit, say with your brother, could start to attack you when you start to be more firm with your brother.
That's it. And
That's
then I chose not to be too firm because I felt I was told I'm interfering with his free will.
Yeah,
no.
All they're doing there is they're saying to you something that you believe to manipulate it because you don't understand free will. You don't remember we talked yesterday about the love principle.
Yeah, this is where I got a realization that I wasn't using any of the firm or all of those.
Correct.
Yes.
So you're thinking you're being loving by saying, they can do anything. But actually that's not what God does. What God has given you free will and then he's given a whole heap of laws. And if you break the law, there's a penalty.
Yeah. And if he can go to a day centre, which is good for him, but he'll say, no, I don't feel like going. I don't want to go.
Of course, because he gets more at home than he would there.
And I said, well, and then this might be free will. Do I say, no, you must go.
And also you need a rest.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
So at some point you're going to have to love yourself as well.
So I can say to him, no, you need to go.
Yeah.
And he can play it up then, the spirits can.
Of course they will. They will every time.
Yes,
Until you break the bond, they will.
Yes.
Because it's not where they want to be.
Okay.
In the day centre, they're more restricted.
Yes.
If it turns out that they do something actually bad, they'll be held down and potentially medicated, which the spirit doesn't want, of course.
Yeah.
Because then they can't have control anymore. So they don't want to go there, right?
So they put thoughts, then the staff get concerned and they talk to him and he says, he doesn't even understand, I want to suicide myself. And then they come back to me and I feel, well, this is.
But that's the spirits too, right? It's the bribery method.
Yes.
So that you feel like, no, you can't let that happen. Yeah, it's a method of bribing. And I have seen spirits cause a person to suicide, yes, of course. Because it's a way of bribing you and then following through with it. If they were really serious, they'll follow through. If those spirits are quite attached to the person, they know that if they kill the body of the person, then they won't get all their attachments. So for the most part, they won't follow through. But I have seen some follow through. Yeah? And you wouldn't be to blame for that either.
But now I understand about the other aspects of love, being firm, and this I know is good for you, and I understand that this was where I was having the confusion.
Yep.
Am I interfering with his free will? I understand that.
Yeah, and you're not. Yeah, it's not even his will you're interfering with anyway. It's the spirit's will.
Yes.
His will is already interfered with by the spirits. You follow?
Yes.
Yeah. The spirit is controlling the lad. Yeah. So the spirit is responsible for his actions. Yeah. And the lad is just barely there sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You get times, don't you, when they are there. The spirits get a bit tired and they have to go away for a while.
But engage with something, yes.
And you can have a bit of a chat then, and generally, like talking to a young child, you can have some reasoning and it generally works. But if the spirit is there, they're not going to listen. Because their intention is, I just want to get what I want. I want him to do what I want. Yep.
Okay. But now I understand about the other aspects of love, so
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
it would be.
Yeah. So and this is why we need, we've barely touched, the subject yesterday, which was the principles associated with love, and then we wrote love on the board, didn't we? What's God's standard of love, and you wrote a whole heap of things. We've barely touched that list, right? Barely touched it. And what most people think love is just primarily their addiction getting met. That's it. As long as they meet my addiction, that's love. And that's not love from God's perspective.
There's an expression here now called tough love. But again, I don't feel that's loving either. Tough love. But then.
Well, love is firm.
Yeah.
But I don't, when you say tough love, it sort of makes it almost sound violent.
It doesn't feel loving.
But it's firm. Like firm is unyielding. Like you don't change your mind, or it's just like down the line. No, you've broken principle out the door type of thing. That's God's way. God, if it wasn't God's way, what would happen to most of you is you'd break the law, you'd have no penalty, right, for breaking the law, and then you'd think, if I break the law, it doesn't matter. And then what would you do? Break more laws. And break more laws until the point that your own body decays so much because you've broken so many laws. And if you think about historically, many people in a position of like wealth have done that, exactly that. They've broken so many laws that their own body decays from syphilis by the time they're 30 or something. Do you know what I mean? Because they broke so many laws. Their own body couldn't even be sustained anymore from the poor spiritual soul condition. And the whole body starts disintegrating for all sorts of reasons. Right? And the more you break the law, the more the spirits have to pop you up. So sometimes they do that too. Like I've seen people who are so ill and so sick from breaking the law, like particularly laws of self-love regarding alcohol, for example. They're so ill and so sick that the spirits keep like pumping energy into their liver and pumping energy into their kidneys, keeping them drinking, pumping some more energy into try to heal the kidney and try to heal the liver, because they know they're going to lose this guy, but they want the drug or the alcohol so much. They know they're going to lose the guy if the guy dies, and then they'll have to go and find somebody else. So what they do instead is they're pumping full of energy here, energy there. Sometimes you see these old guys who are basically non-compass mentis the majority of their life, right? My own grandfather was one of these. He used to drink one flagon, which is in Australia, is 4.5 litres of port every day. Right? And he did that for the majority of his life. He died at 56 from, what do you reckon? Liver and kidney failure. Yeah. But they were pumping him his whole life, keeping him going. He was a sick man from his 40s, When I compare what I look like now, and I'm 61, with him when he was in his 40s, I look like younger than him. Right? He was so wrinkled and old, and his whole body was falling apart. He's still drinking his flagon of port every day. The spirits needed it, right? So he's having it, and that's it. And he's in the spirit world now, and he knows that that's what happened. Yeah. And one time he actually sat in the back of our car while we were travelling along. We were going down to one place where he used to live, and we invited him to sit in the back of the car and we had a chat with him. But it was, he's still to this day, like he's dealt with all that now. He doesn't go and get drinking. He doesn't drink with other men. He did in the past. He went and did the same thing to another person on earth. But he got so sick with that eventually in his spirit body that he stopped that. That's the only reason why I stopped. So you see this a lot, with this spirit over-project stuff. Yeah. For me, what it is that the spirits have known who I am since I was born. So many of them attached themselves to my body from the time I was born, which is the reason why my bowel got damaged when I was and had to partly be removed. I had terrible agony from spirits all of my life, but I never did what they wanted. And because I've never done what they wanted, they've just caused me agony for a lot of my life. Does that make sense? And what I'm doing now is by going through different emotions is by patching up the holes that they have some connection to. And as I patch up the holes, certain ones of them leave. They're pretty angry about leaving. So what happens when they do leave is they inflame other people around me to attack me and do all sorts of things as well. And that's all just a part of the process of eventually them leaving. Now, Now, I've had, on the average, around 2 million spirits in that place with me since I was a child. And that's extreme because they know who I am. The average person maybe would have one or two, one usually, right? Maybe 3 if it's extreme, right? But because they know who all of the 14 on earth are, all of the 14 are under this terrible kind of influence in different ways. And for me, it was all about just attacking me all the time. So I ended up as an adult having quite poor sense of worth as a result, and was very prone to people like taking advantage of me all the time. And so that's something, as I emotionally work through that, you'll notice I'm becoming more firm with people taking advantage of me, right? And that's all a part of healing the problem, and also getting rid of the influence. Yeah. So all the 14 understand what it's like. Many of them, of course, are still in it. So Mary has taken you a solid 15 years to get rid of some who've been influencing you. We've only just got rid of some this year as well.
It gets better each time, but then often it's, for the 14, it's where you have taken on the influence and almost agreed with it internally, or allowed the involvement in your thoughts, if you like. And then as I've dealt with different feelings with men or women or fears that I have, I notice that this huge weight is lifted, and suddenly I feel more present, or suddenly I feel more like, when you're under a lot of influence, when you're in sort of acceptance of it, you can feel very strange, like, oh, I think I feel this thing, but now suddenly I feel something else, or that makes a lot of sense, but suddenly I can't understand it, or, because there's that emotional engagement with the spirit, it affects how you think you are, or how you're behaving, and lots of different things. Of course, then as you let go of that influence, there's a period where you're no longer sort of in agreement, even if you're in agreement through just, I'm afraid, so I'll do what you want. Then when you say, I'm not going to do what you want anymore, until you release the fear, there's a feeling of being attacked or everything, but you can now feel it's coming from outside of you, and it's not an internal process that's happening.
But if that's what's happening, I begin to realise that.
Yes, you're beginning to feel, oh, hang on, maybe that's not with me.
It doesn't even feel like my thoughts.
Yes. So it's a good sign, isn't it?
Yeah. And it can take a long time or a short time, just depending on how fast you deal with your own predictions about something. And so when it comes to self-love issues, often they are quite hard to deal with. And so quite often it can take some time to alleviate spirit influence under those circumstances. When it comes to power-based addictions, they take the longest time to deal with. Frequently we see people never dealing with them on earth at all, of course. So anything power-related where you feel superior is going to take a long time to address as an emotion, and it's going to attract some very evil spirits while you do it as well. So that's the difficulty for most people who face these problems, is that in all the 14's case, they have extreme lack of self-worth. So that's what causes a lot of the attraction, but also because the spirits know who they are. So there's a much more intense situation going on for all of them. But when it comes to the average person, if you've got even extreme self-worth issues, usually it's only a few spirits will be connected to, because you don't have enough energy to do everything they want otherwise. And it's the power people who have the most severe negative influences. Yeah. Okay, so
there's lots of hands up about all of that.
Do we want
run
to
on
keep
this
going?
topic,
That's the question. Yeah.
or do we go to humility? That's not the question.
Well, I think humility has a lot of bearing on the problem, doesn't it?
It does.
So I'm tempted to go there instead. Yeah. It's a lot of these things boil down to a lack of humility in the person. Now, in the case of a child, as you were mentioning, it's not the case. Obviously, it's a lack of humility in the parents, and also a lack of just general understanding of what the problem is. Like most parents are very permissive with their child, thinking that it's an act of love. Yeah. And because of that, they encourage their children to become spirit influenced, unbeknown to the child. And then the child becomes very unruly. So, most children by nature and by you remember God's created their nature and their character and their personality, and their nature has been created by God. Most children are pretty gentle. And even the children who have, strong sense of what they desire to do in life, they're still pretty gentle about it. And it's when they become overcloaked by some pretty dark spirits, that's when they become violent and not gentle. And so every child who is violent or every child who is no longer gentle is generally overcloaked by a spirit. And as to how long that happens is going to be dependent upon how the child develops its own will in the course of its life. So some children never do, and so they end up being drug addicts and, criminals, and often many criminals are spirit influenced. Often. In fact, many of them describe it, even when they commit a crime, that they just zone out and they don't really recollect the entire crime and feels like somebody else is doing it through them. They describe all that. There's well-documented evidence of this for hundreds of years, right? And I find it so fascinating that the medical community and also the just psychologists and everything are not working on it. Although we've just recently seen that some psychologists are starting to recognise that there is spirit influence on the people, even though they don't understand what that means. Okay. Homework. You want to have a break before homework? To go to the toilet? Yeah, well, let's have a short break to go to the toilet and then we'll do that.